football I don't want, bro. I don't even need the game. If they want to play, they're going to play by my rules. If not, I don't need to play. I'm a millionaire, bro. I'm an entrepreneur. Like, I don't have to prove no one anything. I'm perfectly fine with walking away fully healthy or whatever.
That mustache is just a lot for me. I need to take a moment and compose myself. Another day, another update to the AB helmet saga. The latest development is Antonio Brown filing a second grievance against the NFL over his helmet, a source told our Adam Schefter. Stephen A., let me ask you this. We heard the ultimatum the other day. Marcus, what's up?
What's
Marcus
up? What's up?
Okay, at this point, what options do the Raiders have with it?
I don't know what options they have available to them, but I would tell you this. I would dare him not to show up. I would dare him to lose the money he fought so hard to get. Right. You don't show up here, we ain't paying you. Because see, here's where the thing is, and I'm not gonna lie, it's semi-personal to me only from this perspective that I've spoken to Antonio Brown on several occasions in the past. I genuinely like the brother and appreciate the greatness that he puts on display. But him acting like this, I believe personally will have collateral damage that will extend far beyond himself. And I think he knows that. He's not thinking about it. I don't think he's thinking about it. I don't think it's something that's conscientious, but I think he's smart enough to at least know in the crevices of his mind that this could affect people more than him. And to not care about that enough, to just make sure you towing the line and you conducting yourself properly is my issue with him. And so for me, if I'm the Raiders, I don't blame Mike Mayock one bit for doing what he did. I anticipate at some point we're going to hear from John Gruden, who's getting tired of this himself, if not already tired. John Gruden that we know, that worked here on Monday Night Football for 9 years. And I would dare this man to cost himself a dime. So that's what I would do.
We all agree that the Raiders have no recourse. Like, they can't do anything to make him show up. But I do think that arguing that he's impacting more than just him, I think is a stretch. Because what he is doing now, I think people would categorize as being a part of the legacy, frankly, of wide receivers in the NFL. Like, this fits into the trope of diva wide receivers or high-profile, high-maintenance wide receivers. Like, this is not a new thing. This is something that we kind of consider for a lot of wide receivers in history. So I don't think that Antonio Brown has the power to change that perception or has the power to perpetuate it any further than it's already gone. I think what he does now shines a bad light on him, and it'll shine a bad light on him that will stick. It's going to be a stain that sticks because we have
like that
multiple. Yeah, that mustache is something we can't unforget. And maybe when he gets in the Hall of Fame, maybe they'll put a little something on the bust to spray paint a little blonde mustache on there. But this is something that is a part of who he is. It's only going to cost him going forward. It's going to cost him the $30 million if he doesn't show up, even though we all know he probably is going to play at some point. And it's going to cost him reputational value. But I don't think it's going to impact players going forward. What do you think, Marcus?
I agree with you, Foxy. I'm not so much in the vein with Stephen A. that this is going to impact guys. Now, if people see remnants of that, of Antonio Brown in those individuals, that's when the conversation could come up. And I understand what Stephen A. is saying from that point. But here's my thing, and it's kind of like a question. I'm going to say this, and it's a question I want to pose to you guys. To me, it feels like Antonio Brown is in a power struggle with the NFL. It seems like Antonio Brown wants to be bigger than the Shield per se. And we know the perception that the Shield has, good and bad, Foxy and Stephen A. You've been covering this for a long time. I would if I had the opportunity to sit down with Antonio Brown, I would tell AB, hey man, you're not gonna win this one, bro. Like this is the battle that you're waging. Think about the things that he said. AB has talked about not needing the game. He's an entrepreneur. He doesn't need to play. Right. He's accomplished and made as much money as he possibly can make. He's filing grievances over a helmet. He showed the saga in Pittsburgh last year. It seems like not only the people that he's laid, as far as Stephen A. talking about the bodies that he's left, it seems like he has a vendetta over the league that he's playing in. Well, listen. And to me, that power structure is what this is really about, as opposed to
I would tell you this. I would tell you this. That makes sense, and I wouldn't blame him if he did, because if you speak to a plethora of players, as both of you have, you do hear guys speaking about the lack of diversity in the NFL league office, in the Players Association, NFL Films, the list goes on, as something that needs to be addressed. Obviously, there are African Americans that work in all three entities, but at the same time, the numbers could clearly be higher. Having said all of that, we can't escape the fact that, again, if you're going to conduct yourself that way, and Dominique, I'm just going back to my quarter century as a journalist covering sports and the relationships that I have with owners, executives, players, on coaches, etc. You hear people alluding to things like this and using it as an excuse to come at other people who are not nearly as egregious as, say, an Antonio Brown would be in this situation. And you would just want to see that when there's a level of greatness emanating from somebody, that they would be cognizant and mindful enough to think about somebody less than them, because to recognize, I could get away with this potentially, but guess what? Somebody else on the come up has no shot. And I do think there's a responsibility to kind of set an example, and I don't think he's thinking about that.
I don't think that's completely out of nowhere, but I just think like the accommodationalist like strategy is not something that I necessarily believe in. But I do understand what you're saying, and I think that what I find interesting is people like Ryan Clark was on here yesterday, and Marcus Spears just said it, where we're all giving him these long, passionate soliloquies and saying, if we could get with him, this is what we would tell him. Like, we think that somehow that's going to have an impact on Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown is who he is. We can't pretend like this newfound success is what turned him into the player, or turned him into the person who would have these type of petty
grievances. Dominique, I would tell you,
he's been like this the whole time.
I would tell you personally, I'm directing this message personally to you. You are not just a pundit on these airwaves.
Right.
You are a former football player, a highly intelligent individual who was an officer representing a plethora of people, not just yourself. I would caution you to rethink your attitude in certain respects, because the words that come out of your mouth could have a profound impact positively on a lot of people. So when Marcus Spears, who I also feel the same way about, sits up there and says, if I could get him in a room, if Ryan Clark says I could get him in a room, I would like to believe, I'm not saying it will work, but I would like to believe that Dominique Foxworth, more often than not, if he had an opportunity to get cats in the room, could have a profoundly positive impact on their thinking, because I've seen people change their mode of thinking when somebody they respect, who's knowledgeable, can drop some knowledge on them.
That is a masterful debate move that you pull right there, because you're playing on my ego, and I want to jump in, and I want to jump in, and I want to say, that I have the oratory ability to change this man's mind.
You might,
come on,
not him.
Let's be real.
Maybe not him, but somebody else.
But maybe there are some young people watching out here now, and I would say to them, don't act like Antonio Brown. If you couldn't deduce that on your own, and you needed me to tell you that, then I'm sorry. But okay, don't act like Antonio Brown. That's fine.
This diva receiver is nothing new.
I think
like this is, if we didn't have this, come on, this happens.
I think it's more about. I don't think it's so much about getting in the room with him, Foxy. Right. I think it's more about letting AB know, like, how it looks.
Like how it looks.
The way.
He don't care.
Well, I'm not sure. In a lot of cases, I would agree with you, but I'm not sure if AB is conscious of everything that's going on.
I think it's easy. It's easy for us all to pile on AB because he seems quite wrong. And it's the more difficult thing, I think, is to try to see his perspective. And I think that from his perspective, the only argument you can make for him is that this stuff that bothers us about him, this ego, this cockiness, this desire to be treated differently, is also the stuff that drives him to be as great as he is. Like, that's the best argument.
Last point. Let's not act like folks are character assassinating Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown was always cocky and confident, all right? Nobody was saying anything about Antonio Brown until the last game of the regular season when he was AWOL. So what we're pointing about is what he does, not who he is. Don't give him that cushion. Nobody's character assassinating him. We're pointing out that his actions are character